Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful, and we also have our wonderful captioning off to your right. So I would love to welcome you to our annual Day with Experts on Cochlear Implants. We have 4 of those at the Weissman Center during the year on different topics, as I'll mention. And I want to begin by really thanking everyone who has supported and helped organize today's event, and our speakers who are experts on various topics related to hearing loss and cochlear implants, and who are doing hot research off the press. And especially I wanted to thank Teresa Palumba and Shelley Godard, who have tirelessly every year done so much work to make this day happen, between sending the emails and the mailings and making sure everything here today works really well, making sure that our speakers have what they need. And so thank you so much to Shelley and Teresa, who I don't think are in the room because they're still out in the foyer doing more work. We have sponsors and exhibitors, and it's a really important partnership for us. The Division of Otolaryngology, which is right across the street in the Department of Surgery, has been an ongoing partner with many activities that we have here at the Weissman Center. We also partner with the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders, where my faculty appointment is, and this is where we train our students to become audiologists and speech-language pathologists. And you will hear today from some of our experts in the Division of Otolaryngology. These are the people who who diagnose hearing loss, and who then help patients decide what they would like to do about their treatment, and who then help to create a map of frequencies for the cochlear implant device, and who continue to work with patients after they get their implant, as well as speech-language pathologists. And that partnership, that three-way partnership between the patient, the audiologist, and the speech pathologist, and then of course the surgeon, is a huge part of the success of the patient. And we have our wonderful exhibitors who you'll have a chance to, if you haven't already, interact with in the hall today. One of the things that I love about the Cochlear Implant Day with Experts is that this is one of the examples of the work that we do here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison that, to my mind, falls directly under this Wisconsin idea outreach philosophy. So UW-Madison is one of its huge philosophical tenets, believes in the fact that we have a tradition to reach out to the public and to give of the research that we do here on campus back to the community of the people who live in the state of Wisconsin. And in fact, on our website, on the UW website, we talk about the fact in yellow that education should influence people's lives beyond the boundaries of the classroom and the campus. And so our campus does a huge amount of outreach, and this is one of the quintessential examples of the work that we do here on campus that we then translate out to the public. And we are so happy that you're here today to share the Wisconsin idea with us. Now, the idea really comes from guiding principles from people who got this university to where it is today, which is what you'll hear about in our scientific presentations. We identify new problems. We do research to understand how to solve the problems. We educate our students, some of whom are here today so they can become good clinicians and scientists. We reach out to the community. We connect with industry to improve technology, and we continue to identify new problems. So here at the Weissman Center, I think that we shine as an example of the Wisconsin idea and all the things that I've talked about. We are dedicated to advancing knowledge about human development, developmental disabilities, and neurodegenerative disease. And we believe in doing that throughout the lifespan, so from infancy through older age. And as people are living longer and longer, we continue to look at how to advance our knowledge throughout this growing lifespan. So today we'll focus on the work that we do with hearing loss and cochlear implants, which is an really exemplary sort of aspect of the work that we do at the Weissman Center. The Day with Experts comes 4 times a year. Today, in June, we always have the last one of the year. We focus on cochlear implants, but we have 3 other days if you're interested in joining us for any of them on other areas in which there's heavy research that's going on here on campus, in which there's also clinical work and outreach. So we have a day on cerebral palsy, a day on autism, and a day on Down syndrome. And you could see some of our beautiful photos up here from our patients and from the Day with Experts that happen throughout the year. When we think about the work that we do and the way it connects to hearing, at the Weissman Center, we think about the 3 C's. The causes, which are genetic, environmental, unknown, of hearing loss, the consequences for the individual and for their family and for society, and also the cures and the treatments. And so all of those 3 go hand in hand as we move through our research and our clinic and our outreach. We include an array of research areas from stem cells to child development to clinical grade drugs to brain imaging. I was just telling one of our panelists, Jack Spear, I was just telling him this morning that we recently purchased a new machine this year, a technique for doing brain imaging that is safe with people who have cochlear implants. It's an investigational device, not a clinical research tool yet, but instead of using the magnet, we use light sources to shine lights through the brain and look at brain activity. And I'm hoping that next year we'll share some data with you using that technique. And also here you see one of our testing booths, and Gary Jones was a PhD student in the lab. Many of you knew him, and he graduated 10 years ago, and his son is now maybe 16 years old. And I just saw him recently because he went to work for Audicon in Copenhagen, and they're doing some really nice work there, also on a device that is not FDA approved yet here in the States, but Audicon is partnering with a cochlear implant manufacturer, which is the 4th one in the world. So we might see that one coming to the States. And so kind of what goes around comes around, and there's a nice connection there. So today's topic is really dealing with people who have been affected with progressive or sudden hearing loss. And as we know, there are many ways in which people can lose their hearing. We know people who have suffered hearing loss from meningitis, accidents, ototoxicity, noise exposure, heredity, unknown reasons, and reasons I may not have listed here. But what we're dealing with when we provide patients with cochlear implants is the fact that we've gone from having healthy hair cells. We have an acoustic system with tens of thousands of cells that are no longer functioning. And although we would like to regenerate the hair cells, we don't yet have a medical way to regenerate hair cells. We are waiting for that to happen, and there's a lot of research going on in that area. So when we have damaged hair cells, the best alternative today is a cochlear implant. And many patients have made really interesting choices throughout the lifetime. We have questions about whether we should get a cochlear implant or keep using hearing aids. If people have benefits from hearing aids, especially at low frequencies, there's a sensation of sound that you can't get with a cochlear implant. You can have pitch perception and music appreciation, but at some point, if that goes away, could you replace that with a cochlear implant? To what extent? So the question is often, when is my hearing bad enough so that my hearing aid is no longer helping me and I'm going to transition to using a cochlear implant? And of course, there are a lot of questions. What is the process like? Will I be successful? How often do I need to see my clinician? Other questions as well. Should I get 1 or 2 implants? This is an example of a family who have traveled to our lab many times from the West Coast. They're a really interesting family because both parents were born deaf and grew up deaf and are bilingual because they speech read and they grew up with sign language. And then they had 2 children who were born with profound deafness, and they decided that each of the child should get bilateral cochlear implants by age 1. And the children were quite bilingual in the sign world as well. The parents also each decided to get an implant as adults who had been deaf their whole lives, and now they're in their 30s. So their speech production is not nearly as good, and their understanding is not nearly as good as somebody who got their implant earlier or right away, but they love having the implant for having access to sound that they don't have otherwise, and they want to know what their children went through. So there are 6 implants in that household. And those children, you know, if I didn't see that they had implants behind their ears, if I didn't know that they were deaf, I really couldn't tell, because their ability to communicate with oral spoken language is quite outstanding. So that's a really nice example of choices that families make. So we think of cochlear implants as a hallmark of translational research, and the National Institute of Health, which fund a lot of our research, really talk about implants as the hallmark of an engineering example of a medical treatment that has been extremely successful. And in many ways, cochlear implants are a poster child of the National Institutes of Health because they have been so successful. And because the community of people that we know around the world who work on this problem are really researchers who are interested in discovery and treatment, and people who work in the education space and in the outreach space. And so here we have much of that going on in this collaboration between these units that I have talked about. So again, I wanted to thank our sponsors and exhibitors and our speakers today, who you have not heard speak before, and I want to thank all of you for being here, and the captioners as well for your hard work. And what I'd like to do now is introduce our first speaker, and thanks for your attention. And I just want to make sure that In-Young's presentation is... I'll have you... Sure. Thank you, Linda.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you
welcome.
so much.
You're welcome.
I am so excited to have Dr. In-Young Choi here with us today. I have been watching In-Young in his career as he's been a grad student and then a postdoctoral fellow, and I got to know when he was in Boston, and we actually went to a conference together in Hong Kong, which was when I really got to know In-Young. And he is now a professor, assistant professor at the University of Iowa, which is a wonderful place where much of the cochlear implant research started in the 1990s. And I think it's wonderful to have an engineer and a physiologist like In-Young join the cochlear implant research world, because you're bringing novel ideas and novel techniques to understanding how people function when they are hearing speech in noise. So I'm delighted you were able to join us today, and In-Young is going to tell us today about brain exercises for speech in noise understanding. So welcome, and really looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for great introduction. And thank you for having me here. I'm honored to be here and then giving you a short talk about my recent study. So it is about, as you just heard, it is about what you do after you get cochlear implantation. So surgeons, doctors, they do surgery for you. And then after you get surgery, like cochlear implantation, then there is homework for you, which is you have to exercise to use it. It is not really exercise for your ears, but it is exercise for your brain, because it's your brain's job to understand speech when there is background noise. So what I realized from my communication with lots of cochlear implant users in Iowa over 3 years in the past was I found that they really love it, but they also have complaints, which is it is really hard to understand people when there is a lot of people talking in the same space. So it's like this environment is like a noisy bar, a lot of people speaking at the same time, and you have to understand the person next to you. It's not easy. This article is saying we finally know why you can sustain a conversation in a noisy bar, but I guess, I don't know. It's really hard problem yet, and especially if you have hearing loss and if you have cochlear implant, which is great, but like giving you slightly different types of sensory inputs, then it is yet a very hard problem for us. So what we like to know is why some listeners have very difficult time in this situation, and if so, then how we can help them. So before we start talking about this research, let's define this one term that is really important to understand lots of other slides I have. So it is called signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR. That means how intense the speech is compared to the background noise. So it's like ratio. So, for example, in this situation, like, very quiet park, the speech or signal is relatively intense compared to the noise, because all you have there is just like, wind blowing, little birds chirping, that's it. So it's like very small noise, very soft noise, so relatively speech is very intense. But in this kind of environment, like in restaurant, lots of people speaking, so it's like big noise, and relatively your speech, you have to understand that's too soft. So we say in this environment, the SNR is low. This environment, like quiet part, SNR is high. So high SNR, low SNR. It's like easy condition, hard condition. So lots of people, like scientists, have studied when you change signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR, how accurately you can understand speech. So here we have many different SNRs. So this is more like easy condition. This way, this is more hard condition. Here, on the y-axis, we are representing accuracy, which is out of 100 words, how many words you understand correctly. So it's like 80, that means 80 words out of 100 words you understood correctly. So as you increase SNRs, as the noise is softer, as the speech gets louder, then you have better rate, better accuracy in terms of understanding words in the background noise. The problem is though, so we repeated this kind of experiment in Iowa. We only used 2 different SNRs, so there's one easy condition and one hard condition. We measured many normal hearing listeners as well as over 80 cochlear implant users. What we found though is, although they got almost identical cochlear implants, there's no strong differences in their demographics and devices, but you can see big spread of the accuracy. So each line indicate one person, a lot of person, and you can see some listeners here, their accuracy is around 80%, which is perfect, which is really nice. It's very comparable to normal hearing listeners. But some users, some CI users, their performance is very low. It's 20, 30, 25%. So this is our big problem. Like, why do some listeners do so well? Why do some listeners do so poor? So we try to understand why these listeners do so well and why these listeners do so poor using this technique called EEG. Because, as I told you, this is your brain's problem. It's not your cochlear implant's problem. They give you same type of signal, but it's your brain's job to understand what signal it is and how to interpret the signal and so on. So this is our main research tool called EEG. Do you see lots of wires here? It's like very sensitive electrodes. So when your brain thinks something, when your brain gets sound, it spikes electricity. Because neurons, they communicate using electricity. Then we can capture the electricity and then see where in your brain and like what timing at the brain is like being activated. So EEG is like EKG, like you have seen EKG probably. So when you have these electrodes on your chest, then you can see these nice cardiac pulses. When your heart beats, you can measure them. So EEG is the same types of electrodes, but it's not on the chest, but it's on your scalp. So this is, EEG. The electrodes attached on scalp instead of on the chest. Then when you hear sound, you can see, so this is like when you have many electrodes on your head, and if you look at many electrodes activity on the top, so this is the actual EEG graph that I got from many electrodes. So when there is a sound, then you can see this type of activations. So EEG is a nice tool that we can use. I don't know where this is not the sound I made. I think, So we are practicing understanding speech in background noise right now, although I didn't really intend. Okay.
I think then if you advance to the next slide, hopefully that's
Okay, let's try. Yeah. Can you mute just for now until okay. So I know that it was really annoying, right? So this is why this is so important problem. So using that technique, we measured good users and poor performers' brain responses, and we compared those responses. So I know this is really complicated graph, but I wanted to just show you like what you get, from those EEG techniques. So you can see this is time. So in this experiment, we studied noise first, and then after 1 second, so noise is just like being continued. It's just like a lot of people speaking, it's noise. After 1 second, there will be a word you have to listen to, you have to understand. So because EEG is so sensitive to when the brain is being activated and when the brain is giving response, you can measure your brain response to noise and to the speech that you have to understand. What he found, though, is these are responses to noise and to the speech that you have to understand in good performers. Okay? And these are responses to noise and to the speech from the poor performers. As you can see, what we found was their response to noise was stronger. I mean, the poor performers' response to noise was stronger but the poor performers' response to the speech that you have to understand was weaker. So the result you just saw was like from two groups. So we divided all our listeners into good performers and poor performers. When you did a similar type of comparisons after we divided our listeners into 7 groups instead of just 2, so these are like 7 groups, like group 1 to group 7. So group 1 is our poorest performers. Group 7 is our best, our star subjects. And you can see that, and there are 7 bars, and the height of these bars, it indicates how strong response they showed to the speech sound they have to understand when there's a background noise. So good performers, they showed stronger response to speech, but the same good performer showed softest, like weakest response to the noise. So the conclusion is, good performer's brain shows weaker response to noise, stronger response to speech. But poor performer's brain shows stronger response to noise, weaker response to speech. So that means this is like good performer's brain. Like although they heard the exact same sound, but inside their brain, it's like quiet park because they suppressed background noise and they enhanced speech. But in poor performer's brain, it's chaos. It's like they don't really do any attention processes. So brain changes SNR through attention processes. So this is actually an attention problem. So it's like brain process problem. So this boy is watching TV, and do you think if you call that boy's name, do you think this boy will turn to you? So you say, no. No, why? Because this boy is so much paying attention to TV, never really hear the person, like people around him. Okay, so you probably have experience of like this. You are focusing on something so hard, you never really heard anything. So like your partner will be like complaining, right? Did you listen to me? Not really, because your brain actually shut down the sound. So that's what we like to do. I mean, as a cochlear implant users, what you like to do is, becoming like this boy. Like you like to shut down sound when you need to, right? Okay. So then our, plan is, can we train brain's attention processes? So, there's an angel and demon, like saying 2 different things at the same time. So let's say this angel is saying, let's save the Lego man. Like, yeah, you will know like why I'm talking about this Lego man. And this demon is saying, no, kill the Lego man, okay? So this is the sound we actually use for this training process.
Save.
Oh,
save,
because I muted.
Save.
Play again.
Save.
Did you hear the sound? Like 2 people, like woman is saying save, man is saying kill. So what we do with these sounds is, because we intended those 2 different sounds have different rhythm. So when we measure brain responses, when they hear the sound, this is the actual data we got. When they attended the sound kill, you see those like 4 pulses from the brain response. When they attended the sound save, we see those clear 5 pulses because there was 5 saves and 4 kills. So as you change your attention, you see dramatic change of your brain responses, right? So these are really ideal brain responses. Then what you can do with this is, actually, there is a task. So we made this Lego track, like train track, and there's a train coming to this, separated branch, and there is a Lego man standing on the track. So your job is, you have to pull this switch so that the train can detour and we can save the Lego man. And to do that, you have to really strongly pay attention to the sound save. and you have to ignore kill. Okay? So what we do with this is actually we measure your brain responses when you listen to those sounds, save and kill. And then we compare your brain response, or like our brain response, to ideal brain responses, which is showing clear differences between attending save and attending kill. Okay? And we see if the attention was strong enough. Okay? So if the attention is strong enough, then the EEG will be connected to the motor, connected to the lever, and it will switch the lever to save the man. If the attention is not enough, then you will do nothing, and you will kill. I mean, you're not technically killing him, but you cannot really save the Lego man. Okay, that's like a big reward or big punishment, like because you don't want to see a Lego man dies, right? So then brain will try really hard to pay attention to save strongly. Okay. So this is just like video of like operating this training paradigm. So this is a successful case. So you see 3 different video views. So I like this the best because that's kind of action cam. So you'll see as a you are like a trained driver. Okay. So let's see the successful case. So yes, the trigger is pulled and the train detours and you save the Lego man. But in the other case, it's a disaster. Oh no. I don't want to see that. So, what happened after like doing this types of training for 4 weeks? So they came to the lab every week and did this training. We did that for over 4 weeks, and then we compared their brain responses before and after this training. And what we found was this is brain response to noise, when there's a background noise. Before training, they showed greater response to noise, but after 4 weeks of training, the response to the noise got weaker. And vice versa. So brain response to speech, it was weaker before the training, but after the training, it got stronger. Okay. So brain response to noise got weaker after the training. Brain response to speech got stronger. And then this is their behavioral accuracy. So when they had to hear 100 words and then like understand those words correctly, the performance before the training was like, lower, and then after 4 weeks of training, they got improved their performance in understanding speech sound when there's a background noise. So this is the take-home message for today. How well you understand speech in background noise is related to how well your brain attend to speech and how well your brain ignore background noise. So it's a little brain process. And this type of attention process can be trained. So training enhanced brain's attention processes, and then training improved speech and noise understanding accuracy. Okay. And I thank to my lab members, and I thank you who are really interested in these types of research programs and who are happy to come to see us and potentially volunteer for our studies. Thanks a lot. And I have, okay, do you have questions? I'll be happy to answer. Okay, please.
I find it very interesting. Do you have any idea of what the effect is of age of onset of hearing loss is on this ability to train and differentiate?
That's a great question. We believe that if the age of onset is later, then that will be better because you have already a nicely trained brain. But it is also important to not give up, I think, because brain is surprisingly plastic. That means even like you had long time of hearing loss and you got implantation later, and you had quite early onset of hearing loss, after you recover your hearing process through your cochlear implantation, in the first couple of months, we see quite dramatic change of your brain responses. I also have data here. Hopefully I can show you. It is, this one. So this is pre-operation, like before you get the cochlear implant. And after 6 months, you get cochlear implant. It's really hard to understand like what's going on into all the details, but what you can see is the brain response got much stronger, only within 6 months. So the change happens even in the brain which experienced long time of hearing loss. So I believe that it is important. There is actually variability came from how long you have had lost your hearing, but even the listeners who had very long time hearing loss also exhibit this type of like very rapid brain change after implantation. So we believe that the training will give you even more more ideal changes. We hope. I hope that answers your question. Please.
So are you working on some sort of a program or ways that people can train at home or can practice this at home?
That's also a really good question. Right now, this particular training can be only done in the lab because they have to use our Eeg system so that we can look at their brain responses when they are listening to sounds. But this is not only one type of training we have. There are a couple of other training programs they can take home. So using tablets and we also give them speakers, so nice sounds and tablet, and we get their training progresses over the internet. So because everything is automatically uploaded to server, we are also trying to make like portable Eeg system so that they can bring that Eeg cab home or like walk around, go to the bar with the cab. It'll be cool, yeah. So hopefully we can do this this training home. So thanks a lot for a great question.
One last question.
Yeah, one last question. Okay.
It's the same question.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, In Young, for that fantastic presentation. And our next speaker is from our group here at the Weissman Center, the Binaural Hearing and Speech Lab. Dr. Ellen Peng has been here for just over a year and a half. She is an architectural acoustician by training and did a first postdoctoral fellowship in Germany. And then I met Ellen at a conference and immediately invited her to come and join our group because she's bringing so many excellent ideas and techniques to our lab to study, again, how can we understand what is the brain doing while people are processing information, and how do we understand what cochlear implant patients are doing. Especially, Ellen is interested in binaural hearing and people who have bilateral cochlear implants. So please come up. And today, Ellen will tell us about eye gaze, which is a new behavior that we're using to measure binaural hearing. So welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Ruth, and thank you all for being here this morning. I'm very excited to talk to you about some of the work that I've been doing in Ruth's lab, actually in the Weissman Center right here. So yes, we are studying binaural hearing, or the ability to localize. Oh, no, I can't hear. Is this better? Is it a little better? Okay. So I'm very excited to talk to you about some of the work that I've been doing in the Weissman Center here, that we are studying binaural hearing, the ability to localize sound by studying the eye behavior, actually. So imagine that you are trying to navigate this very complex, very noisy street corner. You are this gentleman here crossing the street in the blue shirt, and someone is calling out your name, and immediately you want to localize or find out where this person is coming from. And our brain is actually very good at processing or localized sound. For a sound that's coming from to your left, for normal hearing listeners, the sounds arriving closer to the ear, to your left ear, is actually going to be a little faster and a little more intense in energy than the sound arriving to your right ear. And these two sounds travel through the cochlear and then into the auditory pathway, and the brain is exceptionally good at comparing these two sounds and figure out, oh, indeed, that the sound is coming from the left. So for cochlear implant users with 2 cochlear implants, we think that as long as the auditory pathway is intact or healthy, we can replace these sound or acoustic inputs with a cochlear implant by providing electrical stimulations to the cochlear. And they will do just as well in figuring where the sounds are coming from. So we think that bilateral cochlear implant users will have very good sound localization abilities. So cochlear implant has been a means to restore hearing for large populations. Currently, about 5 to 6% of the world population has disabling hearing loss, according to the World Health Organization. And in the past 20 years or so, cochlear implant has been the standard intervention for adults and children who have profound hearing loss in both ears and who have auditory nerves that are still functional. About 14 million people who could benefit from cochlear implant in the world, we believe, up to today, and only about 1.5 million CI recipients who actually benefit from this treatment or device so far. So I'll talk a little bit about the cochlear implant itself. There are 2 major components. One is the external device. It has a speech processor that's acting like a mini computer. It takes in the sound through the microphones and it computes and converts the sound into electrical signal. And then it delivers through the coil and the magnet that communicates with this internal device that has an internal implant, and it delivers the electrical pulses to the electrical to the electro array inside the cochlear that we see that we see over here in this in the cochlear. So currently, there are 3 FDA-approved manufacturers in the United States for cochlear implants. The external devices are actually very similar, as you can see. They have very similar components, and all 3 manufacturers or all 3 brands are very compatible in terms of their ability for the cochlear implant processing. Currently at the UW-Madison clinics, they provide brand implantation for these 2 brands to the left, but all 3 brands are as equally good. So a number of cochlear implant users chose to have 2 implants or bilateral implants instead of 1 and to restore the ability to localize sound for adults and for children. And for some, in some of the studies that we demonstrated in our lab, for children, this little boy on the picture is doing a sound localization test. We play some sounds from different locations of the speakers, and he has to identify where the sounds are coming from. And we learned that if these children with only one cochlear implant on, their performance in terms of acuity to localize sound, the smaller is the better performance. With only one cochlear implant, their performance is about 40 degrees, so not very good. However, if we give them both implants, one in each ear, when they use both implants to localize sound, their acuity improved drastically. And we see a clear benefit of bilateral cochlear implantation in this case. And there are also studies from adults that demonstrate very similar trends as well. And the reason why we think that bilateral cochlear implant users are going to perform better than with only one implant in localizing sound is because bilateral CI users have better access to binaural cues. So for example, if there is a sound coming from your left, you will experience sounds to your left ear with higher intensity than the sounds arriving to your right ear. And this is one of the binaural cues that we rely on to figure out where sounds are coming from. And I call this the interlevel difference. When the sound is all the way to your left, this level difference between the two ears is about 20 decibels, or about 4 times louder in the left ear than in the right ear. If there's a sound coming from in front of you, there is actually no level difference because the sound will be equally loud to your both ears. So we have 0 dB or no level difference at all. So in between 0 dB to 20 dB, we can figure out where sounds are coming from over the range about 90 degrees. And we can actually test how sensitive a listener is in terms of detecting this level difference by measuring the smallest level difference that they can detect in our lab. What we do is that we play a sound that's right in front of them with 0 dB or right in the middle of their head. And we play a second sound that's a little off to the side with a level difference that's greater than 0, somewhere between 0 to 20 dBs. And we ask them which direction did the second sound move. And we can test many different